Welcome to this video on scoliosis. So Tanya asked me to do a video on scoliosis. Scoliosis being a lateral deviation of the spine, whether one side or to the other side. So I'm assuming you actually know what a scoliosis is, and this is just some things that you can consider when you're doing stuff in class for them. At a basic, and there's with a number of issues, you can just give them Pilates, but it's a case of almost not so much any Pilates moves, but Pilates in general will benefit just about anyone. It's you as an instructor, and working on assumption more here one-to-one rather than the class, but I'm going to make that assumption. So if you were working one-to-one with someone, as with a lot of conditions, obviously I'll use scoliosis as an example, it's more applicable just to watch what's happening on one side compared to what's happening on the other side. So almost if you can split the body in half, and as we're doing certain movements, almost any Pilates, we're after balance in the body. Now balance in the body in this case doesn't mean doing 6 one side, 6 the other, because you've balanced it out. It's a case of, especially for someone with scoliosis, as they're doing movements one side or the other, discovering where they're tight, where the restriction is, and it needs more work on the restriction side. Now with scoliosis in particular, as a general rule, can be numerous causes. Obviously we're just working on a soft tissue point of view. Usually invariably it's long standing. So you're looking at the muscle has physically shortened. So sometimes it's a case of muscles going into spasm, it's a temporary spasm. So if my bicep went into spasm, my arm would go, something like that to different degrees. That's just a case of loosening the muscle off, stretching off. It's a bit more of a shorter term solution. Where somebody's been quite chronic, has been over a long period of time, it's not just the case that the muscle happens to have temporarily tightened up, it's a case that the muscle length has physically shortened. The sarcomeres have been reduced because, for whatever reason, numerous reasons, we'll come into that. Usually it's been held in a short position, whatever, from a posture point of view. Therefore the brain saving energy, because it's always in a shortened position. Why have a long muscle when the muscle's always short? So it physically shortens the muscle and cuts out sarcomeres. That's, I say, more of an issue. It's not necessarily more of an issue, just how you treat that is different. To be honest with you, when you're looking at any muscle which is physically shortened, it's less about Pilates moves per se, and it's about how you treat those movements. I'll explain that in a minute. I forgot to bring my ball down, it's upstairs. I'll try this without the ball for one particular movement, and I'll use that to emphasise what I'm on about. So we're after really more yin-like stuff, if you like, if you're familiar with the difference between yin yoga and say other yogas. We're after developmental stretch. So we're not after your traditional Pilates moves. We're after holding the stretch, holding the position for some time. And the more someone can do that, as in the regularity, then the better it is. Because what you're trying to do is encourage the brain, this muscle is physically, or remind the brain, this muscle is physically shorter, you need to put more sarcomeres there. So if you just stretch them once every so often, it's not going to do it. You need to nag your brain, so you're nagging it that much, your brain does something about it. So let's get to specific movements, or something slightly more relevant for scoliosis. So let's assume you're tight on wherever, but that could be the lumbar, thoracic, could be the neck vertebra, where the scoliosis is. Almost not too worried about, let's say somewhere in the mid-spine. So let's say side bends. As you do side bends, now you can do them standing. I would suggest, for scoliosis point of view, it's going to be a little bit more stricter if you're kneeling down, so you're keeping the pelvis still. It's just a little bit more specific rather than standing up. Not wrong with standing up, it's a little bit more specific for that. So it'll be a case of, for argument's sake, doing your side bend. So however you're going to do it, whatever variety, whatever style you're going to do, I'm not going into that. What I'm getting at is, from a balance point of view, if I've got a deviation that way, so the spine curves that way, then the muscles on this side are going to be tighter. So theoretically that should be a bit more challenging on this side. So you'd be looking at doing more on that side. But it's not just your tradition, that's what I'm getting at. It's not just a case of, it'll still benefit from that, but it's more relevant, and again usually with scoliosis, it's more relevant to hold the position, so you're holding the stretch. So it's less your classic Pilates, not classic Pilates, but less Pilates moves, more so as a developmental stretch move, if that makes sense. So rather than, yeah, there you go, going at that pace, it'll be more applicable to hold it. So that you send a message to the brain, a bit longer standing message. Look, this is short, this is short, this is short, this is short. So you got to do something about it. So as well as going to, you can do it standing up, purely from a room point of view. I'm not going to do it standing up as well. But a very good one to do is not just go to the side, but take it slightly to the front as well. So you're not just literally just lateral flexion of the spine, there's anteromedial, or there's flexion slightly, maybe 45 degrees, say, to the front, on whichever side. You do both sides, but do more on the problematic side. Rotation, because of the muscles usually involved, rotation's another good one to do. Almost any of the rotation ones, I'm just using this one as an example, more of a yoga move really, to be honest with you. Any of the rotations, various ways you can do it, arm openings, type movements. But again, it's about paying attention to which side is restricted, which side is the shortness on that we're trying to lengthen out. And again, more applicable for something like scoliosis would be more developmental stretch. You're more holding the foot for a longer period of time rather than your dynamic moves, which sums up certainly classical Pilates anyway. The saw, very good one to do. The very good, especially for scoliosis, is one that I like to do, and it's basically a variation of the saw. I usually have a ball, and I'll roll the ball out the centre as a basic. I'll go over to both sides, so you're keeping it rolled out there, and you're rolling it forward to one, and then sinking down. All the time you're pushing it out, pushing it out, pushing it out. So again, if my scoliosis is that way, the curve in my spine is that way, it'd be more applicable to stay or do more on this side. And it's a very good one to do, developmental stretch, where you're holding it. And you might be holding it for a few minutes, but if you want to keep it relatively simple, a minute. Certainly no less than 20 seconds, 20 or 30 seconds. So it's less of your normal Pilates moves, which are quite dynamic. It's more of holding it there, waiting for tissues to give, and then maybe if you're able to, can you sink a bit more into it. So hopefully the move per se, like Superman's, it's a good move to do in this position. Now you can take it in different stages. You can just use the arm to start with, the leg to start with, hand and leg. Again, I'm not really, the aim of this isn't to take you through every single possible move. It's possible to do for that. Again, most Pilates moves, it's just a case of you as the instructor watching them, and you really need to treat them slightly differently, in the sense of, less about doing it, go 6 that side, 6 the other side. You need to be holding it as well, doing more on the more challenging side and holding it. Almost anything, if you know your anatomy, almost anything which is going to stretch off and lengthen those muscles that are short. But bear in mind again, usually with scoliosis, it's not just a case of they're temporarily short, as in they're going into a bit of spasm. It's they're physically short, therefore you need to treat them slightly differently. And that again usually encompasses holding it for any period of time. And that's it basically. Like I said, it depends on where the scoliosis is to the exact movement that you do. It's less about what movement you do than how you treat it. And as with any condition, as I say, you'll be watching them, you should be watching them anyway, and seeing what's happening on one side compared to what's happening on the other side, and make an accommodation for that. I hope that helps. I hope it's sort of answered the question. So tell you just do something on scoliosis. I'm assuming you know moves that you can do, other than the ones that I've mentioned. Just stick to basics. You don't have to go anything too in depth. The biggest thing is you watching them and treating it slightly differently, doing more on the more challenging side, and for something like that is holding the stretch. And thanks for watching.